Hello, welcome to this video where we're going to make a small bowl like this. This is made out of Siberian elm, which has some nice contrasting dark and light colors with some interesting grain. The first step on this is to start out with half a log, which I have some over here in this box to keep them from drying out. There's some other bowls that are started here. I'm going to start with this one right here. No one started on this one yet, and you can see right here it's going to make a bowl about the same size. For this next step, we are going to need a couple of things. A pencil, we're going to need this center finder, and a drill. We're going to use this right here to find the largest circle that we can on this piece of wood by looking at these lines. It looks like the 6-inch circle is the biggest one, so I'm going to center that right on top of that, follow that around. It's a little bit bigger on this side, and then I'm going to mark where that center is with a pencil, and that's going to tell me where to drill a hole. That's going to mark the center of our bowl. So I have this half-inch drill bit right here, and I'm going to drill in about, about an inch. All right, now that I have my hole drilled, I'm ready to go over to the bandsaw. All right, we're going to head on over here to the bandsaw. I have a few things ready to go here. I have my log, of course. I have this circle jig here, which I want to put in place so that the center of this strip is about right where the blade's going to cut. I'm going to clamp that down over here against the table so that's not going to move on me. All right. And then where I drilled this hole, that's going to go right here in this dowel. Get this positioned. Now I'm going to look over here to make sure that I have enough space here. Yep, this is set for this size log right now. If this were a bigger log, I would have to remove this screw and move this until it's a little ways away from the blade on one side, and then tighten it down so it doesn't slide. But this is going to work for me just the way it's set up. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this, the throat down here, because this is a little bit too much space, and I'm going to tighten that up. That gives enough clearance, and the blade won't flex as much with the throat closed lower. All right, so now I'm ready to start cutting. All right, I'm going to turn the saw on. And I'm going to be very careful to make sure that as I rotate this around, that I don't rotate my hand into the blade. So I'm going to keep my hands on this side always. Alright, I hit stop. I make sure that I hit the brake down here with my foot so that the blade stops. Blade is stopped. Now I can take this out. Let's take a look. I made it pretty round. Next step is to take the extra pieces and throw them away. We're ready to mount the bowl blank onto a faceplate. There are two sizes to choose from. If it's a larger bowl, you can choose this larger one that has 4 holes, but if it's a smaller bowl like this, I like to use the smaller diameter one, which has 6 screws, that means there's less of a chance that I'm going to run into this when I start turning this than if I use the larger one. So what I'm going to do is line this up with the center of this. Let's see if I can, there's a shadow there, but you can see. I'm going to line that up as close to center as I can. And then I'm going to find some of these 1 5/8 inch zipper screws, and I'm going to start screwing these in. Now I want to make sure that when I do this, I just go until it stops and not keep going, because what will happen if I keep spinning the drill when it's in there, the threads will rip and tear out the wood grain, and it'll strip that out and they won't actually hold on to anything. So I'm just going to go until it stops, and then I stop. And you'll hear it, it's an impact driver. So at the end, it pulses to get those last extra space filled up there. So, all right, so that's mounted good there, it's nice and solid. That shouldn't come flying off at me on the lathe. All right, here we are over at one of the lathes. Let's take a tour. We have a variety of tool rests. There's a short straight tool rest and a long straight tool rest. And the tool rest that's mounted right now is this curved one that is used for bowl turning. So we're going to leave that one on there. We also have a variety of tools to use here, which go back in the spots. We have our turning tools here on the right. We have this, which is called a lathe chuck, which you'll use to mount the bowl to turn the inside. This is a wrench that we use to tighten and loosen the lathe chuck. There's some measuring tools, and then there's 2 sets of wrenches. We're going to need this wrench right here to mount our bowl onto the lathe. Here we are. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to insert this into the threads, and then I'm going to spin it. Notice that I'm not actually spinning it. On the other side here, there's a wheel that you can spin, and what I can do is I can hold one side and I can spin the other, and that'll spin it on, or vice versa. Now when it gets all the way screwed on, we want it tight. So to lock it into place, there's a button here that you push and spin it until it locks, and now I'm going to be able to tighten this. It doesn't have to be super tight, but just snug. I'll put that wrench back. And then I'm going to get this set up. We want to put our tool rest as close as possible to the stock without touching it. Now, right now I'm not putting a curve in this, so I'm actually going to switch tool rests so that I can get this closer, because right now it's hitting right here. So I'm going to switch to this long one. I can get a little closer. So we want this to be right at about center and as close to this as possible without touching. How do I know it's not going to touch? I spin it by hand every time to make sure, because sometimes you might get it close in one spot, but it'll hit in a different spot. That one's pretty round. All right. Now I can adjust that with our knobs down here by moving the tool rest forward and backwards and adjusting the angle and the height of the tool rest with this. And then I tighten those down pretty well. Now I'm ready to start turning. We have a couple of different tools here. For bowl turning, you're really only going to use 2 tools to begin with. You use this one here, which is called the scraper. It has a curved end here. It's very sharp, so be careful. You're going to use that for the outside of the bowl. There's another scraper that has a shorter handle, which makes it nice for doing the inside of the bowl later. You can see it just has this round tip. And then you're also going to use this parting tool for parts of this. Might be other tools here. Don't use those. Those are for not turning bowls, and if you use those, then your bowl will probably break and fly apart. So let's get the camera in here so we can see how to begin. Alright, we're ready to begin. I'm going to turn the machine on right here. First I'm going to make sure this speed is turned all the way down. I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to adjust the speed. Usually when you start off, it's probably somewhere around 400 or 500. If I turn this up way too much, it's going to start to wobble on me because the bowl's not completely round yet. Now as it becomes round, you can turn this up higher, but at the beginning you want to start at a lower speed. So now that the speed's set, I can turn it on and off with this right here. And in case of an emergency, I can turn it off with the big stop button down at the bottom. So my speed's set. Now I'm ready to start removing some material. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to hold my hand underneath the tool rest. I'm going to put the tool, the tip of the tool, in between here, my finger and my thumb, and I'm going to very slowly ease this in, very slowly, until it starts to just make contact. If I jam it in there, it's going to get caught. Now you can see and hear how it's cutting. I'm going to get us a closer look at this. And then I move from right to left. On the outside of the bowl, you want to go from right to left. That's the direction of the grain. My goal here is to just make this round. I'm going to angle this tool rest a little bit. I'm going to go at this area here where it sticks out a little bit more. But going from this side here isn't going to be as effective if I can angle this in. So my tool is going to be 90 degrees or perpendicular to the tool rest, and I'm just going to concentrate on this area right here and start to get this round so it matches the natural curve of the tree. So this part that's sticking out is going to be round like that. So I'm just going to spend some time just in this little area of the tool rest, make sure that it clears there, and then I'm going to go back to it. Alright, now I'm going to switch tool rests here because this flat one is a little too flat, so I'm going to switch to this curved one, I think. This will allow me to start to get this curve a little more, to put the banjo a little closer. So it's hitting there, so I always check the clearance first, make sure. So I'm going to spend some time right here in this area to try to get this part rounder. The rest of this is already round around here where my hand is. But this I'm going to have to shape and take the bark off. All right, let's take a closer look here and see what we got going on. We have a pretty nice round bowl. We got a little bit of bark here that still needs to come off. So that I'm going to spend a little bit more time here, and I'm going to make the bottom flat. All right, let's take a look at what we got going on here. This is turning into a nice looking bowl. I got it round all the way off. I got all of the bark off. I've got it flat on the bottom. And now I have to make some design decisions about what I want this bowl to look like. There's a couple of things I'm going to look for here. The first thing is all of these concentric circles here have a center at this point right here. This was the center of the tree. It's called the pith. And when this bowl dries out, this is going to dry out and there's going to be stress in different directions and this will crack. So when I turn the bowl over and I do the other side, I'm actually going to turn this all the way and remove all the material past the pith. So really on this bowl I'm only going to get from, say, where my finger is here lower. So let's just imagine that all of that's gone. Then I have to make some decisions about what I want my bowl to look like. And part of that is that to mount it on the other side, to do the inside, I'm going to have to put this lathe chuck in or on this so that it holds on. So I have two choices here. I could make a bowl that has a foot that looks like this, and this lathe chuck will go around the outside of that. I just open this up and put it on the outside. Or I could make a bowl that has a recess like this one where the lathe chuck would go on the inside. Back up here a bit so we can see. It would go on the inside. I just make it smaller. So it's an artistic choice of whether you put a foot on your bowl or if you do a recess and put it in. And for me, it depends on what the bowl says to me. Every bowl speaks differently to me, and I look at the shape after I get it all rounded off and I say, what would look best on this bowl? And for me, on this bowl, I'm going to do a recess. I'm going to make that hole so that these jaws can fit inside of here and open up to hold this in place when I turn the inside. So to figure out where that hole is going to be, what I'm going to do is take my lathe chuck, because I'm going to make this wider. I'm going to start with this turned all the way in, closed. I'm going to put it on here about where it's going to go. I'm going to take a pencil and I'm just going to estimate and put a little mark here. So you can see that little mark right there. Then I can get my tool rest back, actually use the pencil and hold it on there, and I could spin it, I could turn it on, but I'll just spin it by hand. And that gives me the size that the hole needs to be. So it actually needs to be slightly bigger than this. So when I start turning this, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so that the lathe chuck can fit inside of that. Now if you were doing a foot, you would do the opposite, where you would make this bigger and figure out the size that it needs to be for this to clamp on. But for this plan, I need a hole about that big. I am going to use a different tool here. I'm going to use this one here. This is called a parting tool. It's used to part different parts of a spindle, but we're going to use it in this case to make a shoulder edge that we can use to put the lathe chuck in. So I'm going to get this set up. So that's this tool is going to cut with the tip higher than the handle. And I want it to be at about center. So right about there is going to work. All right, this seems like it's going to work. I'll move this out of the way. I'm going to need to make sure that it's deep enough so that the lathe chuck goes in far enough, and it does. And the way that I can tell that is that when I put the lathe chuck on, it fits all the way flat this way, and there's not a lot of space in there. And if you look at this, this is actually an angled dovetail here. So when you saw me turning that and cutting it, I actually angled the tip in so that it would match this angle pretty close. Because when this expands, we want it to kind of suck this on here and hold it tight. All right, now that the outside is turned and I have the recess for the lathe chuck, I'm ready to take this off and flip it around. All right, I have my special Allen wrench. I'm going to hold this tight against here. I'm going to turn this so it goes out, and I'm going to tighten this really tight because I don't want this to come flying off. All right, so my first step here is going to be to reduce this down to past the pith here, which is that center of the tree, which is about right here. So I'll be able to see that later. Might mark it with a pencil here in a second. So I'm going to switch tool rests again to something that's flatter, just to get this done. Now, warning, don't do the outside of the bowl anymore. If you do the outside of the bowl, it's going to break on you and go flying all over the place. So now you only spend time on the inside of the bowl. I'm going to check it and make sure it's spinning. I'm going to turn the speed all the way down because I have a new mount here. I want to check that. I have some good clearance here. And now I'm just going to spend some time removing this material until it's down to past that pith on this side. All right, let's take a look, see what's going on here. If we look at the pith here, I'm just about there, but I want to go past it. So pretty much where I have this lip, where it changes to flat, I'm going to go all the way down to that, and then I'll know that that pith is gone. Notice that when I turn the inside of the bowl, I'm going from left to right, because that's the way the grain runs. All right, let's take a look here. We have gone down past the pith. We see both ends of the log. Well, it's still a little bit of a lip that goes up there. I kind of like that. So now that I've gotten that flat, I got rid of the pith. Now I'm going to start to hollow out the inside. I'm going to switch tool rests so that I can use this curved part. That's going to help me get that inside. I'm also going to switch tools. I'm going to switch to this shorter scraper with this carbide tip, and that makes it so that you can angle this and not run into the safety cage in the back or the safety glass in the front. I'm going to start by positioning this flat, and I'm going to work here from the outside in, and I'm going to cut more on the inside than the outside. All right, we can see here that I'm getting further and further in here. Now I don't want to go through all the way to the bottom, because then I'll have turned a funnel, not a bowl. So there's a couple ways that we can check this, but the way I like to use it is with this tool that I made, which is a dowel that moves in and out of this board. And what we can do is take this perspective, can put this board right here, and then we can look at how far the dowel goes down. Now remember, the lathe chuck goes in about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or so, but where my fingernail is. So I wouldn't want to go this deep, so I'm going to back this up a little bit. It's mostly estimating, but I wouldn't want to go probably deeper than this. So when I put this at the deepest spot on the bowl, I can go a little bit deeper, but not too much. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time shaping the inside of this and cleaning it up a little bit, spending some time around here on the edge. You can also hear it. The thinner the wood is, the higher pitch that it makes as it turns against the tool. And so it's a little bit by feel, some by measuring with this, but you don't want to go through the bottom. So I'm just about done. All right, I think I'm pretty well set and done. Let's take a look at this thing a little closer. It's not a bad looking bowl. I'm going to take it off of the chuck. Careful not to drop it, so I'm going to hold it. All right, so there it is. I'm going to have some sanding to do later on after it dries out a bit, but it's a good rough bowl that's going to work. I can kind of tell in the middle I'm a little thin, but it's going to work. Now, before I clean up, I'm actually going to use some of these shavings to keep this from drying out too quickly and cracking on me. I'm going to take some of these wet shavings that are around. I'm going to put them in the bowl here. I'll get some off the floor here too. And then I'm going to take a paper bag, put some of these wet shavings in here with the bowl. And then I'm going to put this away for about, I don't know, a week or two, and I'm going to check on it, and when it's dry, then it's ready for sanding. But that's it. That's how you make a Fresh Foods Siberian Elm bowl.